Am I the idiot for yelling at my ex and telling her to stop trying to make our kids perform for her after the death of her husband? My ex-wife and I share 2 children. Our daughter is 13 and our son is 11. She was remarried for 7 years and has 2 children with her late husband. He died a week ago. My kids were not close to the man. He was a hard ass and the kids found him overly strict, and I agree, and they didn't like being around him. The relationship at best was strained, but they confided in me over the years that they hoped their mom would leave them. She loved the guy though, and when he died last week she was a mess. Our kids were with me when it happened and she wanted to see them, so I brought them over. They comforted their mom and she told them, repeatedly, it was okay to cry, it was okay to miss him, that they were all going to miss him. The kids said nothing. She kept repeating it. I told her I thought the kids got it. When the kids saw their mom again, she was halfway through planning the funeral and asked if they would be able to do a reading or something for the funeral. The kids said they wouldn't be able to. She was with them a while and then said, since they weren't crying much, maybe they could take a reading and see how they did on the day. Kids told me about it when I spoke to them and they asked if I could talk to their mom. I told my ex not to force the reading. The funeral day came. I showed up for my kids. They were hanging back with me a lot, and they told me their mom kept watching them, which I witnessed myself. For the funeral I sat behind them since she wouldn't let them sit with me. She told us that all her husband's kids should be seated up front, and I didn't have the heart to tell her they weren't his kids, on the day of her husband's funeral when she was such a mess. So I bit my tongue and supported my kids. It was after the service when everything went down. The kids came to sit in my car for a while and we were laughing about something. Ex came over and asked how they could be laughing when they had just buried their stepdad and why did they show no grief at all over the loss of the man who was part of their lives for 7 years. She said it was almost like they were glad he was gone. She told them they should have been looking way more somber after he passed. She told them if they really didn't care they clearly needed help because her husband loved them. I stepped in and told her to lay off the kids, they were kids. She told me to stop interfering in how she parents our kids. My daughter ended up getting mad at her mom and told her she wasn't sad he was gone. He was an ass and she had always hoped she would leave him. She stormed off and my son followed. Ex was going crazy and I yelled and told her to cut it out and to stop trying to make our kids perform a grieving routine over her husband. I told her they were trying to support her and she should be proud of them for that. She started yelling back at me about what an asshole I am, so I walked away. ETA more details on why my kids had issues with him. He spoke to them like they were soldiers and he was their commanding officer. That was how he spoke to his own kids too. Barking orders at them. Also very strict on how they sat and stood, posture. Was very tough on them regarding what extracurricular activities they wanted to do. He had his own ideas of what kids should do and my son especially wasn't interested in the sport aspect, and that was not what my ex's late husband liked to hear. He also didn't believe kids should be helped with homework beyond kindergarten and did not like how the kids would react to seeing me during exchanges. He believed kids should act civilized at all times, and them taking off running and jumping into my arms was something he did not approve of and said it to them, though not in front of me after I told him it was what we do. Comment 1. She's also extra upset because she knows her kids did not like that man, she knows they were unhappy around him, but she always was able to just play the denial game and tell herself, it's okay, they will get used to him and love him with time. Now that he's gone and her kids aren't mourning him, she has to come face to face with the fact that not only was he not go for their children, she made their lives so miserable by staying with him that they're actually relieved by his death, and that's her fault. She failed her kids so hard by banking on this man who is now gone, and she doesn't want to come face to face with all that. Comment 2. Yes, I remember the drive to the graveyard to bury a friend of mine, laughing and making jokes with the other pallbearers. It wasn't that we didn't care, we were fucking devastated. But after spending the service crying, we needed a bit of relief before we had to carry our friend to his final resting place. Grief is complicated, and there's nothing wrong with sharing some jokes or funny stories about the deceased, as long as you are not being disrespectful. And kids especially will process things differently. Now for the next story. Am I the idiot for not reminding my ex he was supposed to come over to see our daughter? I 26F, have a 7-year-old daughter. My ex, 28M, wasn't involved in her life by his own choosing. Back in December, he reached out. It took some time, talking and a little therapy. He's been back in our daughter's life for about 4 months now. We are working with the courts to establish paternity and for him to get custody. In the meantime, I've let him visit her at my place. He's taken her on day trips. Since getting a bigger apartment, he's had her spend the night. He was supposed to visit her Wednesday, have dinner with us and watch a movie. We try to do things the three of us, per the therapist's recommendation, so she can see us get along. My ex said he'd be over around 6 o'clock. He didn't show up. By 6:30, my daughter was hungry, so I fed her. I tried to put off the movie, but eventually let her watch it. She was disappointed about her dad not showing up. I put her to bed at 9. 11:30, my ex calls, freaking out. He said he forgot we were supposed to have dinner. He only remembered because his girlfriend came home from work and asked how everything went. Rather than apologizing, he got mad at me and asked why I didn't call him. I said I'm not going to chase him down. I already spent 9 months doing that when I was pregnant, begging him to be in her life. I'm not going to do that now. It's up to him to make an effort and remember this stuff. We had therapy the next day and she's on my side. However, my ex insists that I should have called. I'm frustrated that he hasn't tried to apologize to our daughter. My mom said that I should have called. Comment 1. My ex completely vanished the day his wife filed for divorce because he no longer needed to appear to care about my kid. He didn't care before she came along either. Only while they were together. My kid actively maintains contact with her, she makes genuine efforts and he does the same, but hasn't heard from his dad in 2 years. OP's kid is old enough that she may well figure out that dad only cares because of the girlfriend. If stress fortunate, the girlfriend will actually care and be a positive person in her life, if she sticks with dad long enough to matter. My kid's stepmom has been a blessing to him and the rest of our family. I know that means we were blessed, but I will always wish that for every other child in similar circumstances. Comment 2. Also, keep a log of everything he promises and fails to deliver to your daughter and her reactions, what you need to do to compensate, and support her through it. Make sure in the custody hearing that you present this and that she has an opportunity to talk to a non-biased adult about how it's been to have him back in her life. Not saying at all that you should try to block his attempt for custody, but there shouldn't be an automatic assumption that it's in a child's best interests to have a life divided between both parents. Contact visits may be better than shared custody. Now for the next story. Am I the idiot for calling my ex a deadbeat in front of his family? I 41F have a daughter, Sam 14F, with my ex-husband Brian 44M. We divorced when she was 4. Brian made a real effort to be a good father for the first couple of years after our divorce. But then pretty much overnight he seemed to lose interest in her. He stopped coming to parent-teacher nights, never came to any of her sports games and stopped asking about them, refused to pay child support, which I eventually stopped asking for. I have a well-paying job. Would forget to pick Sam up on days he said he would, stop asking to see her at holidays. On the rare occasions he remembered to pick her up, he would try and smooth everything over by buying her expensive gifts. And it worked for a really long time, but it started to wear off now and Sam is starting to see through it. Sam has maintained a very close relationship with her paternal grandparents. Sam is a very accomplished field hockey player and represented our country internationally recently, and it's likely that she will be on the World Championship team later this year. We returned 2 days ago, and yesterday her grandparents wanted to take her and the rest of the family to lunch to celebrate. Brain showed up 45 minutes late, didn't apologize. His parents were surprised, and told him to behave. As Sam was recounting her time and summaries of the matches to her grandparents, Brain interjected and belittled her performance, because she'd only scored 1 goal. Sam burst into tears and ran to the bathroom. I comforted her and she asked if we could go home. I agreed and told her to wait in the car while I got our stuff. When I returned to the table, Brain was defending himself against his parents and I snapped. I told him he was a deadbeat and recounted all of the things mentioned above and that I wouldn't be surprised if Sam cuts him loose one day. Our daughter is wonderful and does not deserve to be treated like this. His parents seemed shocked as he clearly had given them the impression he's a good father. He threw a tantrum and stormed out. I apologized and left money for half the check with his parents. Since then Brain has sent me several messages, and his parents texted to say they don't appreciate the scene I caused in the restaurant. I don't think I did anything wrong, but my parents agree with them, so maybe I did. Comment 1. If you mean US states, state filial responsibility laws don't allow a parent to sue a child for regular payments to support the parent's lifestyle, they only allow entities like nursing homes and government agencies to go after children for reimbursement of certain nursing care and medical care expenses those entities incurred caring for the elderly person if the elderly person is impoverished and has no assets the entity can go after to recover those costs. And the kicker is, these laws were written before Medicare and Medicaid were enacted, and there are now federal laws that explicitly prohibit entities that bill Medicare and Medicaid from going after adult children for expenses incurred caring for a person who qualifies for these programs. An elderly person would usually qualify for Medicare, and an elderly impoverished person would usually qualify for Medicaid. All state government agencies that would provide nursing or medical care for someone bill Medicare and Medicaid, and 80 to 90% of nursing homes accept Medicaid. Generally, the ones that don't accept Medicaid are the super plush expensive ones, not the ones someone who is impoverished or in danger of becoming impoverished is going to end up in. So cases where an adult child can actually have a filial responsibility law enforced against them are pretty rare. Comment 2. Also, for the love of everything good in this world, actually talk to both grandparents and lay out everything that deadbeat asshole has and hasn't done. Don't go full movie trope and have all this drama happen because you couldn't properly communicate like a basic functional adult and give simple explanations. If the grandparents are giving you shit, you need to find out if it's because they don't have the full picture, or because they are trying to minimize the consequences of your ex's actions at the expense of your daughter's feelings. If it's the latter, they will do it again and again as they push your daughter to infinitely forgive her father despite the infinite harm he will cause her.